because it is an expectation, there must be some engagement in one form of activity or the other. That activity could be a physical activity, or it could be a non-physical activity. But the key thing here, there is an initiation, which initiation, in accordance with the laws of nature or the laws of creation, which is, that initiation is similar to a planting, the sowing of a seed, and in return, one expects that that seed will grow and mature. Some seeds are done here on earth in a physical manner. Others are done in a non-physical manner. Some of this could be our thoughts. Some could be our intuitive thoughts. Some could be in the spiritual. But the key thing here is that there has been an initial activity. So that is how these things go. For without hope, it means there is no expectation. There is no future expectation. One is stressing the word future because you do not hope for what has already happened in the past. So you always look forward to the future. So it always means that the individual or the masses must initiate some form of activity. It doesn't mean that person must be, in quotes, a scientist or an artist. It only means that individuals or the group of individuals or a nation, each personality that make up the body, have the innate ability to expect something because they themselves have called or have engaged in some form of activity, and in return, in looking forward, it will be beneficial.
Thank you for that clarification and of the definition of hope, and giving that picture, and just reminding us the whole context of how this hope you can say operates or how it functions, and now you stress on the future there, so so for sure, because if whatever has happened, it's the past, so we can't change the past. It's only the future that we can build and or work in the present, of course. So another thing I want to ask about, Gregory, in terms of this future expectation, what about the attitude? Because you said initiate an activity, but what about the attitude? Because again, in the definition, I found this one on Wikipedia. It says, hope is an optimistic state of mind that is based on an expectation of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's life or the world at large. And the example they give, expect with confidence and to cherish a desire with anticipation. So, Gregory, do we need to, you said initiate an activity, but also what about the attitude? We need to be optimistic. Yes.
Well, in the further analysis or looking deep into it, in the initiation or in the sowing of a seed, the attitude also comes in. But above all, it is not merely an attitude as such, but having the right perspective of the framework of nature, the way nature works. For what happens, many consider that only the way they themselves, in their attitude, consider it to be, that is the way it must be. That lie in such an attitude lies the difficulty or the impossibilities. Although they themselves have specific outcome, what it must be, they are not convinced or they haven't shown any personal conviction that the response, the final expectation must be in accordance with what they have viewed. So there are challenges there. The attitude also determines, at the same time, but you have the personal maturity of the person hoping also comes in. If the maturity is high and the attitude swings with the laws of nature or the laws of creation, then such a person will not already form rigid expectation, but should be fluid, not very precisely knowing how it will turn out. But on the long run, the returns will benefit that person spiritually.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. Again, we are expanding the concept of hope and the reality of how it works. And you mentioned there about the framework and the laws of nature. And so we don't live in a vacuum. There's we have to breathe in, breathe out. I know you've said that in the past as an example. So we have to, all those things need to be considered when we are thinking about hope. And we don't live on our own. The activity takes place in a framework, which you said was the laws of nature and or laws of creation. So, Gregory, how do we get to appreciate that, this framework? Yes, how do we get, because otherwise we are likely to have, like, let's say, wrong idea of this hope.
Basically, each person must know, without having to go to university or go to any big study, that those things which are alike, those things which are of similar quality, come together. That is not difficult to know. To know that when one, as a farmer, plants wheat, he or she must reap wheat. When one sets out on a good and firm volition, before too long, that which is good and firm will return to the person who initiated and also maintains that. So with that becomes a beginning. So one should not expect to go to the farm, as an example, and sow wheat and expect to reap mango. The general expression which is used is that of the attraction of the same kind or attraction of homogeneous kind or homogeneous types. In the Walk in the Light of Truth, this is expressed as the law of the attraction or the law of attraction of homogeneous species.
Thank you, Gregory. Yes, it's, I will say many of these things, it's like we are familiar with them, but we take them for granted and don't realize that actually this is like a foundation on which the world works, and we have to not only acknowledge it, but really appreciate what it is, how this is happening. So so when you take things for granted, it's just you pretty much forget that that's what is going on. And so it's really good to remind ourselves that there is, like I use the word foundation, there's the way this world works, and which is, let's say, through the laws of nature or the laws of creation. And so it is necessary to become familiar with them, and and that's where you have the, like I said, the foundation to build on. You can work from there. So thank you for bringing that out.
May I also add something to it?
Sure.
That we are familiar, because you use the word familiar. That familiarity is always there. We then come to believe in what we are familiar with. However, it is different when we do not examine further. So on the one hand, familiarity now grants us that belief that we know. But in essence, we do not know. For if the human spirit had investigated further, it will now move from that state of familiarity, in quotes, belief, to a different state of knowing, that is, of personal conviction. And that personal conviction can only come about when you weigh thoroughly. You weigh and you examine. And in that process, you now move from belief and now move to another state of conviction. Only then would we say that it seems as if scales have fallen away from our eyes, and now we can sense, we can see clearly.
Thank you for that further explanation, or not explanation, addition really to what you've said, because it really is again building the picture. It's like a journey. We start, let's say, like a child. We learn to speak, and then we can write, and then which is maybe a few words, few sentences, and then we can make a story from it. So you could say the life is also a journey of learning, of growing, and you said becoming familiar with these laws, but that's only, let's say, one step. You have to keep going, and which you said, let's say, becoming familiar, let's say, becoming a belief. But then that's not the end of the journey. We have to keep going until that weighing and examining, as you say, and then that way we're coming to a conviction that this is real. It's something, otherwise it's all still theory, or let's say blind thing, or taking things for granted, really. And that's not living, that's just following blindly. So I think the point here is we must be alive in what we are doing. Everything must be examined, weighed and examined. So thank you for bringing that point out. Listeners, also, Gregory mentioned there about the source of the knowledge here is the Grail message in the light of truth by Abrushin. So I just want to let you know, if you are interested in getting a copy of the Grail message in the light of truth by Abrushin, or want some more information on the Grail message, then you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that: www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And you're listening to the Spiritual Discussion Program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And we have a topic every week for discussion. The topic for discussion tonight is hope, being the new year. So I wish you again a happy new year. I invite you to join us with any questions or comments on the topic of hope. You can contact us on our UK number. It is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, another very common saying is hope springs eternal. And what do we mean by this? Hope springs eternal. Is it like, can you tell us more about that?
Can you repeat the question? Hope springs
eternal. Hope springs eternal. It's like hope is always eternal. Is there something special about that? Is it like we are always optimistic? It somehow sounds that way to me.
Well, to a large extent, it sounds that way, but it seems more like an acknowledgement that whenever a personality initiates an activity, then that activity will take on form and there will be a reaping. So very deep within that question is again an eternal law in creation, that of a reciprocal activity. Most likely that is where many were able to sense when it is said that hope seems eternal or brings or springs something of eternity. That means it is that which is beyond, most likely, the earthly conception of space and time. So you now have that even when one mentions a future expectation, as long as there's an expectation, it means there must have been an initial engagement and a return to complete a cycle. So it's a quiet reference to the law of reciprocal activity. Therefore, in that sense, it is correct.
Thank you for that. It just, as you were answering, I could hear that it's sowing and reaping, as Jesus called it. What you sow, you shall reap. So you are constantly planting, and then, the harvest will come from that. So if you, as you say, engage into an activity, then obviously there will be a result. So hope is having a future expectation. So obviously, as long as you continue to engage, then there should be a result from that. So yes, thank you for that. Now, yes, Gregory, everybody's an individual, right? So they are different. And so I want to ask if that, yes, so let's say, level of the different individuals. So so some people, Gregory, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it's like the whole level of hope in each person can be different. And so does that mean that their, the results will be different as well? Because everybody is different. So yeah, so is the hoping, let's say, yeah, will the result be different and have different people have different sort of levels of hope?
What happens when a personality initiates an activity? Again, the level of maturity of that personality, and like you mentioned earlier, the inner attitudes also plays an important role. In creation, human spirits have the free will to decide that which they wish to engage in. And thereafter, the laws of creation takes over. What the human personality is not sure of is when precisely, or the actual nature of what they themselves have initiated. When that will come, they are not sure, although they sense that it will come. At the same time, because they are not sure of the time in which this will come, many are not prepared. They're not prepared in the sense that volition which they had initially must have waned. Even along the line, they themselves must have changed their inner volition, such that when the returns, that which they had been expecting, that which they have been hopeful for, when the results then come as returns, it is found that these returns do not meet the necessary soil upon which they can bring benefit to the personality. And therefore, such returns do not benefit the personality that initially had set things into motion. So what then happens? Because the personality has either matured or, sunk deeper and has changed its attitude, when the returns come, they will be saying some other things which are not in accordance with what they had initially hoped for. So the maturity, patience, and perseverance now come into the whole scenario. And that is why when one wishes to make progress in their spiritual maturity, patience and perseverance must come into the whole scenario. Whereas in the case of hoping at the initial instance, it is a firm, good volition.
Thank you again, Gregory, for the answer there. It really shows that the steps, you could say, uh, of how, sowing and reaping or hope work together, because there are these conditions uh, which, you know, bring out the result, patience, persistence, and maturity you've mentioned there. Um, what about intensity, Gregory? Because somebody could be very passionate about what they're hoping for uh, or wishing for, and others may be less. Well, I'm going to use the word lukewarm, but they're two opposite things almost. So, so is the result also dependent on the intensity, of, let's say, the passion, or the volition, or maybe would that be the same as volition? Because you talked about volition as well.
Volition is there. What you refer to as intensity comes into the whole scenario when one is persistent in their intensity. That means they do not give up. As you rightly know nowadays, somebody needs something, and given another 2-3 hours, their intention, all right, wanes, and they start doing some other thing, or they have even forgotten. What is clear is that one must separate that intensity, whether it's an intellectual intensity or a persistent spiritual intensity, never giving up and being patient. However, the returns will be in accordance, or the manifestations of the returns to that particular personality will be in accordance on how he himself or herself has prepared the soil. If on the long run that person had made a change or has done a U-turn, is no more interested in such things, the returns still come. They still have an effect on that personality. But that person is unable effectively to realize, to recognize that these are the fruits that he himself or herself had put in creation. So one must observe the human personality who is maturing, who can sow and then change his attitude. Therefore, the inner attitude counts. The inner attitude, the intensity, in accordance with the laws of creation, not with the arbitrary attitude that you have, that the human spirits possess nowadays, where they will sow something and expect something else completely to happen because they themselves have sown.
Thank you again for that answer, Gregory. I've got another question, which is a specific example I would like to ask you about. It says here, scientists scanning the brains of persons in a coma found that those who listened to loved ones subconsciously were triggered into awakening sooner than others. How does hope relate to both loved ones giving encouragement and the patient receiving renewed hope?
You mentioned that those who engaged in some form of discussion with loved ones. That means one can already view an attitude of engagement, an attitude of love. Because of that, you now find that love begets love. Again, the attraction of similar types, of homogeneous types, and they are engaged, they are not disengaged. That forms a basis for love or for power or for energy to overwhelm them, to come in. And in the attraction of similar species and in the preparation of the soil, that soil of love, that soil of engagement, they receive more power in order to be healed. Whereas those who do not, one way or the other, may not be in that particular situation. That could only be a part answer to what the so-called scientists have observed. There are more things. Which things can be found by examining the work in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abushin?
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got another scenario, which I would say is not so much scientific, but more like a morale, based on morale, boosting the morale. So I'll just read out that it's a Greek poet once told the youths of Greece that the Spartans were the greatest in battle because even in the darkest hour of their plight on the battlefield, where all seemed futile, they had hope. What power does hope mediate to the soul?
First, in the first instance, when they said they had hope, what type of hope did they hold? Hope of victory or hope of destruction? One should not forget that the youth, most of the time, their sensing is that which is ideal. On that basis, when one is engaged in that which is ideal and strives to give purity to it, then in return, that hope, that expectation will be achieved. What the poet did not say is the type of battle. What the poet might have meant is that in the battle of life, in the warfare of life, in striving to achieve maturity, not in the destruction of other people, but in striving, albeit through fierce competition, they have hope. That means they expect returns because they are engaged in, which returns will only strengthen them. Therefore, the words of the poet have to be examined thoroughly. They should not think that the poet meant battle to destroy others, but a battle which could be a battle in thoughts, a battle which is engaged in everyday challenges.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I think from what I've read in that question, it seems that it was a battle between two, let's say, nations or two enemies on a battlefield, and one was, although it doesn't say it here clearly, because it seemed like one side was hopelessly, let's say, either outnumbered or let's say we're definitely going to, let's say beaten badly. And it seemed futile. The word is used here as futile. So it seems like there was hopeless. It was one side against like a massive side fighting a small side, and the small side basically it was like futile for them to fight in a way. But somehow the Greek poet urged the, let's say, the small army, if I can say that way, still to have the hope to fight, despite, you could say, being a hopeless situation. So I know you were pointing out more about the fight for the, let's say, human soul rather than fight for the between two companies or two peoples. So just to
Well,
yeah, go on.
yeah, what one may say, if one considers that, then the question then arises. There was the case of the fight or the battle of Agamemnon. In the case of one side, Paris, who was brave with the family, and the other side, filled with hope, yet they were defeated because they had, in their fight, they had the wrong attitude, considering because the poet had told them that there is hope. They went ahead when they had started, engaged with the wrong attitude. So such discussions must be examined critically if there is a particular area where a group of people claim that they have hope, which hope is not based on the laws of creation. That hope which is not based on ennoblement, then you will find before too long things will collapse. That one will be false hope, for only that which refines the human spirit, only that can one say is the right hope. Else, it is not right.
Thank you for pointing that out, Gregory, because what you're saying is otherwise they're fighting in vain with a false hope that, actually, even though they're outnumbered, in the very much in a weak situation, they can still somehow have, in quotes, a victory. I don't know what victory or they have in mind, but maybe they just said, we're going to fight till the end. Even if we lose, we're going to fight with our hearts and, knowing that we are still going to lose. But maybe that's what he was inspiring them to just fight till with their courage, just because even though they're hopelessly, outnumbered. So thank you for that. Now, another thing, Gregory, life on Earth is, without hope, it's like this. It's like being predictable. But with the hope, it gives like an inspiration. So, is that like a necessary ingredient in life? Hope that it's not. We're not really having a, let's say, real experience of joy and happiness or peace if it's not hope underneath. Hope is not behind it. So is that is it essential part of our life in our living?
Hope is an intrinsic part of one's life. For instance, if one is absolutely convinced that tomorrow will not come, or tomorrow will not be better than today, then one must ask oneself, what is down the purpose of waiting, of expecting tomorrow, when we know that hope is a future expectation? Therefore, one must stress that hope is an intrinsic activity or an intrinsic expectation of what is going to be beneficial. For one should not forget, most of the time one is looking at that which brings joys. But the reality is that both joy as well as sorrow help in molding the maturity of the human personality.
Thank you for that. There's something, Gregory, we've talked a little bit earlier about interaction of sort of, or engagement, you can say, of, let's say there was a case where I was talking about somebody in a coma, and then the loved one supporting them, giving them encouragement, and then because you said both are engaging, that is what allowing that hope to have, let's say, awakening the patient, while those who are not having that engagement, they're awakening a bit slower, you could say. Now, so it's like working together gives it more power, gives hope more power. So I want to use this example here, Gregory, in the Bible, or just read this from the Bible. It is from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses, I'm going to start from verse 7. So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 7. I'm going to go till verse 12. I've noticed something else in life that is useless. Here's a man who lives alone. He has no son, no brother, yet he's always working, never satisfied with the wealth he has, for whom he is working so hard, and denying himself any pleasure. This is useless too, and a miserable way to live. Two are better off than one, because together they can work more effectively. If one of them falls down, the other can help him up. But if someone is alone and falls, it is just too bad, because there's no one to help him. If it is cold, two can sleep together and stay warm. But how can they keep warm? How can you keep warm by yourself? Two men can resist an attack that would defeat one man alone. A rope made of 3 cords is hard to break. So, Gregory, my question on that is, hope, is it also works in numbers in this way, that, like they say, strength in numbers?
In the earlier discussion, one stressed that hope is only an initiation and with a corresponding expectation of that which will manifest later. In accordance with the attraction of homogeneity, if there are others who contribute, who have a similar soil, who contribute their recognition, who set things in motion, then they support one another, as you will have in the case of, say, football, where the goal is the key. Not one person kicks the ball. It's the same thing with music, where when you have notes being played, harmony only comes when you have more than one note, else it will be boredom. However, when you have a second note, which one may refer to as a second person, and they swing in harmony, then it enhances the tones. There is the enhancement, and through enhancement, energy builds up, which energy then supports the whole.
Thank you for that, Gregory, with that illustration. So, it really makes us see, so it's, when I said strength in numbers, that's not alone. Really, it doesn't work that by itself. There's actually the this whole law of homogeneity which needs to be taken into account, law of attraction of homogeneity. So similar, working together with the similar activities and similar mind. So thank you for that. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And if you're interested in knowing more about the Grail message or want a copy of the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is hope. It's a new year started, and I'm sure we all are looking forward in hope. So I invite you to join, ask any questions or have any comments. Please send them, contact us on this number, our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, there's this, in my research, I found there's a Canadian pastor called Mark Jones, and he talks about faith, hope, and love as three divine sisters. And almost like referring to the Trinity of the Almighty God, so like faith, hope, and love working as three. And he called them divine sisters. So I'm just using that to, as if, in the Trinity, where God Almighty works as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So is that, would you say that's how hope also works? Hope is working in, let's say, three in one, which is faith, hope, and love?
From what you yourself just said, one can already see an internal contradiction. You mentioned, is it faith, hope, and love? Faith, hope, and love, yes. Faith, which is belief, hope, which is what we're discussing, and then love. Most of these things have been convoluted. And I myself am unable to substantiate such, what one may do is to separate, like we have taken hope as an expectation, a future expectation. And then when one considers love, love is not that sort of binding that many expect it to be. Therefore, that expression love has to be examined separately, just as we are examining hope separately. And what was the third one again?
Love.
Faith.
No, faith. Sorry.
Yeah. So people, whether they've been pastors or not, are free to express themselves. At the same time, maybe it will be wrong to second guess what they mean. However, one can discuss beliefs, which is referred to as faith, one can discuss hope, as we're doing now, and one can discuss love. To bring them on the same platform, say they are dependent or independent, that is going to be a separate discussion. So one is unable to comment on that.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Now, in the world, there are so many sort of hard situations, difficult situations going on. One of them, or let's say a series of them, for example, many countries like Palestine, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Afghanistan, there are a lot of people suffering terrible human tragedies over many years, and yet the people have a hope. I think we said it's intrinsic in every human being they have hope, and also they experience a lot of disappointment, with their, let's say, struggle for freedom and peace, and we are aware of the human failings, but I want to ask Gregory, in such, let's say, tragic and very difficult situations in these sort of countries, with the lack of resources and people in a very, let's say difficult situation, can there really be hope for such people?
In our discussion, we stressed that expression hope is an expectation, a future expectation. That being the case, each human personality, through its activity, always has a future expectation of that which will be beneficial. What then follows is how they strive after that which is beneficial to them, whether be it earthly or non-earthly. For it is the human personality, by human personality one is referring to as the human spirit, that benefits, whether it be through joys or through sorrow. It is such that through joys is able to give gratitude. Through sorrows is able to learn, is able to experience that which is not beneficial, is able to open up and ask for help. Just like we had during the time of Moses, when at that time the people of the Jews went through such terrible hardship, and in their sorrow they themselves could look into the souls of men and recognize the inner emptiness of those who inflicted such wickedness upon their physical bodies. At that stage, they open up. It may also be that the physical struggle continues for these peoples you mentioned. At the same time, for some, they may well open up and see that some of these things which they themselves hold so much to, some of the rigidities which they themselves have placed on their paths, is of no avail. And before too long, through their inner conflicts, their sorrowful state, they detach themselves and to a large extent mature faster spiritually than those who in their blind rage inflict such on these personalities. It is not easy. However, many still make the effort to move forward. One should not forget that one of the tenets one should hold up to is to maintain an earnest good volition. Another has to be that of patience and perseverance. Perseverance not only in the earthly sense, but perseverance or patience and perseverance in the spiritual sense.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Now, I've got another question. I think we have sort of mentioned it already, but I feel it's, we are now in the third lockdown in UK with this pandemic, with this coronavirus mutant one or new variant spreading very fast. And it started today. And the big thing in the news was about the children's schools being shut down, which everybody's been trying, well, they said they wanted all the children to continue to go to school, if at all, is so important for this, like the next generation. And one comment that was made was that, this will build the children with great resilience, what they're having to go through now, home learning, it's not easy. And many of them, we know that, let's say, especially the poor ones, they don't have the resources like internet and computers to do it from home, study from home. So I want to ask you, Gregory, about this resilience. Is this for the young generation, those children, school children, is that really really true? Is that so, that it will build the resilience for these children like this experience?
In the first instance, it is only an assumption that it will build resilience. True that challenges help people to adjust or to look for alternatives. The first challenge before they go to the children is to look at the so-called adults. How have they responded to the challenges of this virus? Has it helped them to build resilience? Only that which one knows, which one has experienced, and knows how to respond to it. Only that becomes one's own. You can share what you have. You cannot share what you do not have. And therefore, if the so-called elders have not been able to build resilience in their outlook, in their activities, how will they then turn to the younger ones who are still, developing, who do not yet know what real challenges are? So it is disingenuous to put these young ones, fledgling, through such scenarios and say it will help them to build resilience when they who speak of resilience lack it.
Thank you for that. And now, Gregory, I know we've mentioned already about faith, hope, and love, although the topic tonight is about hope. I just want to ask something about faith a little bit, which is that when we're talking about all these trials in life that people are going through, we heard that in the news. We talked about the, for example, Yemen and those other countries, and then with the COVID situation, pandemic, that the world, people in the world are suffering from that as well. So we are facing trials on that. So I want to ask: is this experience a test of faith? Because we've talked about we always need hope, but also is it also a test of our faith and how we respond? Are you there?
When we started with our discussion, the expression belief or faith also came in. In that brief or mini discussion, we also mentioned that which is familiar to us. It is familiar because we ourselves are able to perceive physically. We're able to see or to touch or use our five senses. What is key is not only what one is familiar with, which is basically the five senses that you can use to perceive things externally, but that's what lies behind it, which is the intuitive perception. The question is, with belief, which one has tied to that which is familiar? How has the personality made it alive, deep within them in spirit? For it is that which counts. All others, when challenges abound, or when one is faced with storms, which storms may come through people making mockery of what you hold as belief. It may come through challenges you never expected. How is one able to hold steadfast? That is what counts. For only that which is anchored through activities in spirit, only that is genuine. Only that one will persist, for it is anchored in spirit. And therefore, when many talk of belief or faith, and they say it's a test of faith, who does the testing? The Lord Almighty tests no one. It is the human spirit who is supposed to be on the alert through the activities. It is the human spirit. When it neglects its duties as a human personality, only in that scenario do you have challenges coming, which most likely will form like a storm and overtake it. Whereas if they had been open, then they would have matured and been able to perceive these challenges. Hence, it is given, watch and pray. Not only that, even in the teachings of Christ, it is mentioned, all right, that when he said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And then it's mentioned, and lead us not into temptation. Therefore, the Lord Almighty does not test anyone, does not challenge anyone. It must be stressed that it is the human spirit that cried out, made the request to be able to become self-conscious. In that process, the possibility was put in place with the fiat, let there be light. In that process, preparations were made for the benefits of the human spirit, such that in going from one level to the other, it will wake up and become conscious, which leads to self-consciousness finally, and is able to return home to its origin as a self-conscious human spirit. That was not a temptation. It was only a preparation which the Creator put in place to help to awaken. So how can now the same Creator now put challenges in terms of faith when it can sense that the human spirit is not strong enough and has put things in place to enable it to be strong? Therefore, those who harbor such expressions, such notions, are off the mark and they have missed the real happening.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got a question sort of related to what you've been saying there. This COVID-19, it has brought some serious suffering to some people. Let's say some people who have gone into intensive care, they've suffered multi-organ failure, very terrible consequence. And in other people, so they've been very hard. And then there's other people which have got COVID and they even have no symptoms. And it made me wonder, if this illness or sickness is, is due to some individual sin somebody has committed, or is it the genes or some lack of strength of the immune system, because, it hits one person, like I said, terribly hard. Others, nothing happens really to them. In many cases, they don't even know that they have it, asymptomatic, they call it. So when it hits, when COVID-19 is hitting people, individually, I'm talking, is there something to do with sin in it? Is there something like that involved? Or is it the genes and the immune system?
Within the scheme in creation, whenever the human spirit makes decisions or a collection of human spirit make decisions, The returns definitely will come. When they will come, one is not sure. They may have an approximate time. When this return are to come, and when they do come, it is hoped, because the human spirit has that inner capacity, to have prepared itself physically, prepared itself in thoughts, prepared itself spiritually. Therefore, when these returns come, if that personality has not been prepared or is not prepared to respond to it in the appropriate way, there are some who already have some illness, such that when they come, when these returns come, they are easily susceptible to what's in quotes called the COVID. There are some, for one way or the other, through what they have eaten or through some other things, they have prepared themselves such that it will just come, hit them a bit, and it will bounce up, it will bounce back. Again, this goes to buttress that it is vigilance, not only in the physical, but also vigilance in thoughts and vigilance in spirit. That is what counts. There are many who have been treating COVID, who are susceptible to being or to the attack, yet they are able to escape it. So a variety of returns must be considered at this present time. So when it is said a sin is involved, the sin that you may be referring to is that lack of preparedness. For one who is already unwell and the returns come and hit, if that person does not act very quickly, just as you have in the past, that we know that when winter is coming, in many countries, jabs are given. This is a way of preparing. And if these jabs are not given, the fairly elderly ones are susceptible to attack, and they may give up in that process. Therefore, it is expected that through our activity, one must be on the alert. For, like you rightly know, these diseases, also challenges, they keep mutating. They do not wait for the human spirit or for the personality to get to know them very well. For it is the human spirit themselves or the human body that provides the soil upon which they can grow. And therefore, if the human soil is not good for it, it will not attack. Now we know that these so-called viruses do not attack stones because they are not compatible. So the best one may do is to prepare oneself, either through vaccines or some other ways that they themselves are used to.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And if you're interested in the Grail message or want to get a copy of the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that: www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is hope. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And just to remind you, listeners, you can listen to us on the website for the station is BLESSRADIO1. I'll spell that. It's bless and then radio and number one is there. So it's BLESSRADIO1, the number one.com. Also, you can listen to us live on YouTube, which is, of course, go to youtube.com, and in the search box type in BLESSRADIO1, the number one, BLESSRADIO1, then space live stream. And you can also listen to the recording of the show, which is the next day, which is on YouTube. You go to youtube.com, then type in the search box BLESSRADIO1, the number one, then space Grail message, and then the topic for tonight, which is hope. So that's BLESSRADIO1 space Grail message, that's two words, and then the word hope for the topic tonight. Okay, so Gregory, we talked about what is the meaning of hope, which is a future expectation, sort of a beneficial outcome, and then but it requiring engagement from us. And I just want to ask, can we also explain hope as in the concept of being courageous, modest, and loyal? Because, we did mention earlier that there's some, you mentioned there's a framework with the laws of nature. Then we also mentioned that there's a, use the word attitude, you could say, or volition that takes, so it works in this, there's a framework. So what about the concept of, being courageous, modest, and loyal? Is that also part of the, working in hope, with hope?
How can one be courageous when one does not know the framework of what courage means? Before one becomes courageous, one must have inbuilt, cultivated confidence. One must have been engaged in weighing and examining, weighing with one's intuition, examining with one's intuition, again and again. That is the key. Only through that can one then decide or separate that which is useful from those which are not so useful. That means one now puts priorities and say, this comes first, then we go. True the response of which is more like the expectation. In practicing that, observing it and letting it register spiritually through one's intuitive perception, one becomes confident. From the confidence, one now becomes courageous. Else, that confidence or that courage has no place. You cannot be courageous in destruction of that which is supposed to bring you benefit. What happens in this case is the spiritual maturity which one is supposed to attain. Long ago, the barbarians were very courageous. However, were they very confident? Confident that their activities would lead to the ennoblement of the human soul? This sort of scenario we come across on a daily basis. You build confidence when you have returns, when you have put in a signal and then you have a return, then you have that registers. You take another activity and you observe the returns. If the returns of the activities wipes you out, will that be a benefit? Therefore, one should be very careful. It has to be that one may go forward courageously, but before that is the confidence that one has built in accordance with the framework of creation. Which framework is that? For certain, there is, when one has a firm good volition, in accordance with the attraction of homogeneous species, or that which is firm and good will bring back good. That is a confidence one has, and that becomes hopeful. Secondly, that when one sows, one will reap. That is a law in creation. When one is convinced spiritually of it, that brings confidence and therefore brings hope. For when one has sown that which is noble, that which is noble will return sooner or later in time. That is a certainty. That brings confidence, that brings hopefulness, and one can move forward. And thirdly, that which is light, which is noble, that one stays on top. That which is heavy sinks. In the case when we go through sorrowful experiences, it's as if we are dejected. It makes us heavy. So that which is lighter makes us swing. In the case where we listen to some piece of music, whether locally or internationally, we feel energized and we feel much lighter. When one comes to experience these things again and again, that gives the person confidence that there are returns and that that which is good will bring back that which is good. That is the sort of framework which is built, and upon that one may go confidently or one may go courageously. Otherwise, the human personality will go around in circles, remain in the same place, thinking it's making progress.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. Another aspect we haven't looked at yet, and that is you could say, the negative, let's say, effect of the darkness. Some people think, we talked about our wish to, for, let's say, having beneficial expectation, but then there may be, let's say, other factors who are, let's say, attacking that. And we've heard of, especially in the Bible and some religious texts, about the Satan or Lucifer. And I want to ask, or even darkness, as some people refer to it that way as well. What or how can that impact or influence, our hopes, for beneficial, results in the future? How can the darkness or the Satan sort of interfere with, our wishes?
Maybe an appropriate answer will be a scenario. In the discussions earlier, one mentioned that the personality must harbor a firm or earnest good volition. And one also mentioned there must be everlasting love, must be present, striving, and readiness to serve. Also added to it was patience and perseverance. And finally, one also added absolute selflessness and dedication. Now, in the biblical stories or narratives, there was the case of Job. And in that narrative, it was said Job persisted. One can say that in this particular scenario concerning Job, he was steadfast. He harbored the qualities just mentioned. So whatever temptation came his path, which the darkness placed on his path, he was able to resist. He was able to come out successfully. Therefore, one first must realize that there are challenges out there. The question will be, how should one go about this? And that is why in forums like this, one keeps stressing that there are the virtues, which virtues have been hammered in man. The virtues of faithfulness, the virtues of truthfulness, of grace, of modesty, of heroism, of courage, skillfulness, of wisdom and humility, and also compassion. That if one strives to ensure that these virtues are cultivated, which have been instilled in the spirit of man, many a challenge which may come its way, those challenges will not overwhelm it, and he or she will return home to paradise as a self-conscious spirit gem. For if one is not conscious, how would one know that the challenge which is assailing one is to benefit him or not to benefit him? But if one strives for self-consciousness, that means these virtues, these talents which have been sown in the human spirit, if these talents are cultivated in constant activities, in constant struggles, then whatever challenge presents itself, through the cultivation and the use of this, one is confident that one will assail, one will win through. That is the purpose of life.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got another question. It's about Jesus, actually, in his mission. He said, can one say that even Jesus's outlook on to humanity was such that that had him crucified? Let me start that again. Sorry. Can one say that even Jesus' outlook to humanity, such that this had him crucified, was not based on a certainty that his word will be accepted, but on the premise of hope that humanity will change for the better? So I'm just going to say that again, Gregory. So can one say that Jesus' outlook to humanity was such that such as it is that it had him crucified, but it was based on not on the certainty that he would be accepted, his word would be accepted, but on the premise of hope that humanity will change for the better?
To some extent, because Jesus himself knew what hope is. He knows what that having sown some seeds, that there are future expectation, not for all, but for some who have a strong volition for that which is good. But they themselves, the human spirits, must cultivate that which is in them to be able to recognize the hope that the teachings of Christ brought. For if they do not, the words and the teachings will mean nothing to them. They may believe or they may be familiar with the teachings, with the message, but they are not convinced of it. And these are two different things. To be familiar means you know about it or you have an idea about it. To be convinced of it is that you yourself have utilized it again and again and again. Then, only through such rigorous activity of self-examination and weighing, and the key here is self, not the intellectual weighing, but the weighing by the self, the weighing by the spirit. Only the spirit can come to recognition. The intellect really is only a tool.
Thank you for that. Now, I would like to read something from the Grail message for the listeners. I had two choices. I'm going to take the short one because what I'm going to read may not sound as directly related to hope, but I will take it as I'm using this almost as a general direction, really, how we should approach, our lives. So, this, listeners, I'm going to read from the Grail message. It's actually the first lecture of the Grail message, and it's titled, "What Seek Ye?" And I'm just reading a short section from it. It's from the lecture, "What Seek Ye?" Awake, look around you, listen to your inner voice. That alone can open the way. Heed not the dissensions of the churches. The great bringer of truth, Christ Jesus, the personification of divine love, did not concern himself with creeds. After all, what are the creeds today? A shackling of the free spirit of man, enslavement of the divine spark dwelling within you, dogmas that seek to compress the work of the Creator and also His great love into forms molded by the human mind. This indicates a dishonoring of divinity, a systematic disparaging. Every serious seeker is repulsed by such things because they prevent him from ever experiencing the great reality within himself. As a result, his longing for the truth becomes increasingly hopeless. And finally, he despairs of himself and of the world. Therefore, awake. Shatter the walls of dogma within you. Tear off the bandage so that the pure light of the highest may reach you undimmed. Then your spirit will soar aloft in exaltation, jubilantly sensing all the great love of the Father, which knows no limitations of earthly intellect. You will at last know that you are part of this love. You will grasp it easily and completely, unite with it, and thus gain a new strength, daily and hourly as a gift, enabling you to ascend out of the chaos as a matter of course. So, dear listeners, that is a section I was reading from the Grail message in the Light of Truth by Abdul Sheen, from the first lecture in the Grail message, which is called What Seek Ye? And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want to get more information on the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Now, Gregory, what I want to ask is, we talked a bit about faith earlier on, and of course the topic is tonight is about hope. And I'm wondering, when people have blind faith, when the people expect miracles to happen to save them, because hope, I know you said, is future expectation, and but somehow, let's say, although we've gone deeply into this topic of hope tonight, and we said this is all about, it involves engagement, but somehow there's still some people, let's say, expecting some miracles to happen, out of that, whatever belief they are in, and or whatever thing they're thinking. So, Gregory, is that such hope? The people with, let's say, such attitude, and having such an expectation, because we are talking hope is an expectation, future expectation. What is going to happen? We're not going to be judgmental about it, but what happens when you have this blind faith about salvation, that God will save them, like a miracle will happen to them and they'll be saved?
In the first case, there is the wrong attitude, like you mentioned, which wrong attitude directs their gaze in the wrong direction. Therefore, what they are hoping for will not happen. For there is no one who, through their activities, go to the farm and plant wheat and become so hopeful that, of course, there will be returns, which returns should be mangoes. That will not happen. Therefore, the key thing here is to carefully examine what they called faith. For because they are familiar with something does not mean they know it and they know how to speak the language. Here, you may have someone who is familiar with different languages. That is, through the sound, they can differentiate from English, German, or French, maybe Russian. However, to be able to be familiar and have belief in it is different from that ability to speak the language, to write the language, or at best to communicate effectively. Communication effectively lies understanding. With it lies recognition. When one understands the language, which language creation speaks, he or she will now know how to use that understanding to ask if the need arises. Would not then expect that these laws which make creation, which operate in creation, these laws through which he himself came into existence and became or striving to become a fruit of creation. These laws cannot be swept aside and therefore will not have the wrong expectation. Which wrong expectation may now mean that the Almighty, because he as a human spirit has cried out, will come running after him to provide, like a spoiled child would expect everything to be provided there without him making the right effort. That has always been the problem. Wrong expectations. Even if a personality has the right expectation at the beginning and is not persistent in holding the right expectation, in that scenario, that personality prepares the soil such that when the returns come, they will uplift it. Else, once that personality changes, when the returns come, they will have no impact on that personality. For that personality may even reject the returns because he himself has changed. And that is why it is good that one must persevere. One must be patient. These are the key things that help the human spirit. Not to sow a seed today and expect, because they have planted the seed of an apple today, and then tomorrow, because there's an expectation, they should have apples in abundance. that would be a wrong expectation. The mills of creation, they may grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly very fine.
Thank you so much, Gregory. We've come to the end of the show tonight, listeners. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. I think it was very enlightening, and thank you for joining us for that. Gregory, anything you'd like to say goodbye tonight?
One will wish everybody a very wonderful new year and all the best.
Thank you for that. I will join you in that as well. Happy New Year, everybody. Best wishes for the coming, you could call it adventures for this year. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back again as usual next Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. UK time with another topic. All the best, everybody. God bless. Take care.